Welcome, I'm Jon Caldara, president of the Independence Institute and your devil's advocate. It's that time of year again, the beginning of session. It's like the beginning of a football season. You don't know what's in store. So the legislature's in session. Watch your wallets to find out what's happening there. A few great old faces, including Eli Stokols. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Welcome to public television. You have to run your own camera here.
It's nice to have an audience.
It is. It is good. Lynn Bartels from, I keep wanting to say the Rocky Mountain News.
Well,
it's just,
I still say it sometimes.
From the Denver Post. This is when you are in your element.
I love Gold Dome High School opening day.
You have always called it a high school. Why do you call
it? Is because I think I once wrote something about it is a petri dish of nursed, resentments and hard feelings and personalities and popularity. It is Gold Dome High School, where everybody's like, she said, he said, and how dare you?
When you get caught up in that, and just to give people a flavor, when you're down at the legislature, they act as if they're actually important. When they remember every slight. They never remember every compliment, but any sort of slight, any sort of gossip, who's dating whom, which lobbyist is. Am I wrong on that?
No, it takes a little while. I mean, Lynn's been down there longer than I have. First couple sessions I covered, you're not really aware of that. You're still getting to know people, developing relationships, and then once you've been there a long time, you're privy to every little whisper in the hallway, every relationship, everyone who's playing an angle, every lobbyist. I mean, it is quite a little place, and the personalities are all those familiar characters that y'all knew from high school. The person who's always raising their hand in the front row, the jock, the
cheerleader.
They're all there. They are all there.
The cheerleader.
But a lot of
wait. Let's play this game. Who's the cheerleader then?
Amy Stevens.
Amy Stevens.
Yeah, I suppose so.
Who's the jock?
Mike Johnston's like the cool guy on the Democratic side.
He's like,
who would you say?
Leroy
Garcia is your favorite. I know you got a crush on.
Just visually. It doesn't mean policy-wise, But it's fun stuff.
Who's a nerd? Who's the king of the chess club?
Who isn't?
But sometimes nerd's good for a good reason. Randy Fisher's a nerd.
Kent Lambert. He's into policies.
I mean, Randy's an engineer, for God's sake. He eats raw carrots, and he doesn't partake when they bring in the food. He has his raw food sitting there. But he's really smart. I mean, I had to laugh. I walked by his office the other day, and I go, oh, hi, Randy. He had a whole group of people in there. He shut the door, and I thought, wonder what they're plotting up in northern Colorado.
We know what they're plotting. We're going to be subservient to them in just a couple of years. But talk to me real briefly about the personality conflicts, because they don't always leak out, but there are always these things just behind the surface, and it's usually people inside their own party that are kind of sniping at one another or have issues that have been hold on for years. Am I wrong on this, or is there?
First of all, let's go back. Most of it is actually a lot of fun and lighthearted and things like that. I would say the more ragging on other people, there's more actually R-on-R violence than there is D-on-D violence. Well, yeah, because you have the alleged rhinos, and then you have we're the conservatives and we're doing it right. We're the real defenders of liberty. You have that. I mean, people are careful not to. I mean, the great part about
is there a split between social conservatives and more liberal?
Well, there always
fiscally
has
conservatives?
been, don't you think?
I think so. I think it's gotten better over time. Only because we're in the minority and getting beat up all the time. So
yeah, at some point you have to unite. I mean, my first session in 2000, there was a definite split. Russ George was the speaker, and they were kind of more the normal Republicans, as some people called them. And then you had the other Republicans, as some people called them.
You always see rivalries, especially in a year that's an election year, and you've got this year 5 lawmakers who are aspiring for higher office. So in the Senate, you got 2 Republicans who are basically both running to be the one to take on Udall. So sometimes there's rivalries like that. But being in the minority sometimes or going through political pain, that sort of inflicts pressure points on a caucus. And I think you start to see a little bit with Democrats when they lost big with Amendment 66 after the session last year, and people's approval ratings start to take a dip. People start to kind of, blame, look around, point fingers. So the infighting that you've seen on the Republican side for a while that we're all used to, it's there on the Democratic side. It may not be in as, boss relief. You may not see it quite as much.
Maybe they're just not as interesting.
Maybe. Let's take what you said. This is an election year. 5% of the people down there are wanting to go into bigger office. And so there's going to be a lot of positioning, a lot of jockeying.
Math.
Yeah, so math
Higher
again.
office.
Math.
Higher office. A lot of them are going into office. They're running for re-election.
That's true. But the ones who
sure,
you've
governor
got
and U.S. Senate and
US
Attorney
Senate.
General.
So let me see if I got it right. We've got Hill and Amy Hill, Amy
Amy
Stevens.
Hill,
Right.
Baumgartner,
Randy
running for
Baumgartner.
Senate,
Running for Senate. You've got
Mark
Brophy
Waller
running
for
for
Attorney
governor.
General.
and Brophy running for governor.
Right.
That's a lot.
That's a few.
That is.
All right, so this means that they know the cameras will be on them, and now that there are more and more cameras, they have to watch what they say and behave. What is different about the even-numbered years? I mean, I can guarantee this will be the year Hickenlooper actually vetoes something. Why? Because he has to look more
He did
modern.
year one.
Didn't do year 3. So, but what's the difference between the odd-numbered years and the even-numbered years? This is an election year. People act differently.
Sure they do, because everything's geared toward November. Well, some people say we don't at all. It's always about the citizens of Colorado, and then you hear them behind closed doors. You know, we need to be careful. We've got an election, and that could be used against us. Be
There's a big
truthful,
reason
anything
why.
could be used against you.
I mean, that's the reason why the Democrats in majority in both chambers did everything last year. They did the gun bills, they did the election stuff. They did all the heavy lifting last year because they didn't want to be doing it months out from an election. And I think now a lot of them hope that, you know, some voters may have short memories, or that they can do different things this year that are a little more unifying, less controversial, that they'll, you know, go into the voting booth thinking of that. I mean, the governor today in his State of the State speech did not mention the gun bills, the election reform. He did not mention any of the controversies from last year.
Well, let's go into it. There's a different dynamic. You have 3 different senators. What was a very comfortable lead for Republicans in the Senate last year.
For Democrats,
is now just one little vote. All it takes is, you know, Lois Talktrop, who's angry about something, to switch over.
or
and
Sherry John,
Or Sherry John.
Mary Hodge,
Or
and
Ma-
it's over.
Right, so it's going to be tougher to do that. Talk to me about the dynamics in the Senate, especially. We've never had recalls, and now we've got 3 new senators because of recalls. Is it going to be different?
Well, it's going to be different just because the numbers are different. I mean, it's going to be different because it has to be different. I think it's also going to be different because one of the things that the Colorado Democrats in the Senate did last year is I think they heeded the criticism, and they did a huge listening tour around the state. And they said it was fascinating because, you know, for us in the metro area, it's all live or die, the gun bills, this and that. But when you get out in rural Colorado, it's a lot of different issues. It's, we need this one road widened. Can you help us with the recycling plant? Can you do that? And even like Nancy Todd, she's on the transportation group, and they did a lot of touring. And she said, you know, we heard a lot, and I think we took it to heart. So I think they're going to be a little more careful than they were last year. I mean, when you're...
Let me put it in my terms. They were arrogant last year. I mean, the arrogance of leadership and the arrogance of the Democrats and how they pushed these things through, and I think they hit a high watermark for what they did. I think they turned off a lot of people, not just on guns, but you know, you think about the electric bill for
Senate Bill 252,
right,
renewable
energies for
mandates for co-ops,
for nonprofit organizations, the rural electrics. You know, so of course now there has to be more attention paid to the rural areas, and that's good. But you know, I just don't see how the damage of last year fades in memory. And I know politics has a very short memory.
Well, I think you're right. And I think election year brings different imperatives. There's the imperative for the governor and for certain people who are running for certain positions to demonstrate that they can work together. So there will be incentive to find common ground in certain places. But there's also an incentive, a political incentive, especially for Republicans, to make sure that the public doesn't forget what happened last year, the things that bothered people that caused the governor and Democratic approval ratings overall to go down. And that's to bring back the gun bills, to try to repeal those things. They know they're not going to go anywhere, but it's to keep those things front and center. And I think that's why, you say the numbers are different, and they are, but that 18 to 17 majority is still a majority. And that's why Evie Hudak resigned, and they put another Democrat in place, because that's the most important number. They have a majority, they control the committees, and so these bills that the Republicans can bring up, they're not going to get to the floor because the majority still has the power to send them to committees, to kill them there, et cetera, et cetera. And that's part of, the Republicans know that, but they're going to make the Democrats stand up and kill them again and defend those laws.
It's not just the gun bills, it's the national atmosphere that's so huge. That's going to be a huge impact in this state in 2014, and there's a lot the Democrats in the legislature can't do about that to control that. I mean, it's that off-year election, you've got a Democrat in the White House, you've got all this stuff going on, and I think it's going to be a hard year for them.
When you say, Eli, that that a lot of these things are going to be a no-go. I heard the governor say that he's willing to listen to tweaks on gun bills.
On the background check bill, he said today, yeah, I mean, he didn't say it in the speech. He said it when I asked him why didn't he mention it. And he said, well, we don't want to stay on the divisive stuff. We want to bring people together. If there's ways to improve those bills, and he specifically mentioned that one.
Right. I could see, for instance, it was a Representative McLaughlin down in the southwest corner. I think if he had to do it over, he might still go with the magazine limit, but he might make it 30 so that...
Well, he was the one who, by the way, made it 15.
Yeah, he took it from 10, made it to 15. Why wouldn't the Democrats make a change like that and say, you know what, we listened to the people, we heard it, so we're still going to have a limit, but we're going to do it...
Would that satisfy the Dudley Browns and the gun
wouldn't-
owners?
No,
Would that,
never.
It would never satisfy the Dudley Browns. Nothing will, or the really rabid gun guys. And I'm a really rabid gun guy. But it would mean that AR magazines and standard capacity magazines we can give to our kids when they get older. We can buy and sell. It takes away 95% of the objections of this, and you still have that ban.
You know, I'm not going to buy you on take away 95% of the objections. Let's be honest. Lois Talktrup had a bill last year that was in the works long before Newtown and Aurora, and it was about online training, okay, to get your your permit, concealed carry. Dave Kopel supported her bill, but because it was introduced as part of the Democratic package of gun bills, they couldn't separate it out. Would she get maybe 3 Republican votes? That's something that in a year, it might have been the year before that or the year before after that, probably would have passed with a lot more Republican support. Lois was the first lawmaker to introduce the concealed carry bill, by the way. And just everything was no.
And by the way, she's a pro-gun lady.
Oh, my God. She's so pro-gun.
Yeah. And I don't disagree with her on the concealed carry classes as well. I think
but
you want a person.
3 Republican people to vote for it. So, I mean, there was a lot of digging their heels and no when the governor gave his State of the State last year. When he mentioned guns, the Republicans all sat there like that. But when he said the real issue is mental health, they all stood up and cheered. But they couldn't get support for a mental health bill either. I mean, everything, to me...
So am I hearing there will be no tweaking of the gun laws?
No, we didn't say that.
What do you think?
I don't know if there will be or not. I think there might be, Democrats might be smart to show some openness to listening and not such rigidity with,
Maybe they're
this
smart
is what
to
we're
tweak
doing.
them, though, in 2015.
Maybe so, maybe so. But at the end of the day, that's just an issue that, as we've seen, there's not a lot of common ground on that issue. The Democrats believe that they did the right thing, and Republicans are still up in arms about it. The gun owners are still angry, and we're going to see, to a lesser extent, but we'll see the same issues debated briefly at the Capitol
again. If the governor wanted to take leadership on this, and after the recalls, the governor said, I was never all that crazy about the magazine bans to begin with, which made all of us go, then why the hell did you sign them? Mm-hmm. What I think a lot of Coloradans feel is a lack of leadership coming from the governor's office. We didn't see it on the gun issue. We didn't see it on Nathan Dunlap. We didn't see it on Amendment 66. He's been AWOL, and if he wants to change that law, he can get it done.
I think.
Am I wrong on that assertion?
Well, I think he could get it done, but I always laugh when people say the governor's been AWOL because you don't have businesses moving into the state if your governor's been AWOL. You don't have some of the things.
You do.
Really?
Yes, the economy is picking up. We still have great things going on in the state.
I actually think he's less AWOL than people think on a lot of issues. It's on the issues that the right really cares about. And actually, I shouldn't say the right. When it came to the death penalty, I had more calls from Democrats than I ever did from Republicans, upset that he didn't make some sort of decision on that. But I think that's always a big misnomer when you say, you don't know what he's doing. What's his schedule? What's he doing right now?
Actually, if anybody knows his schedule, it's Todd Shepard. So I can give him a call down at the office and he'll tell you. Go. But the point being, when it comes to the leadership decisions of running the shop, he seemed absent. He seemed to wait until it came to the desk. His predecessors, I think Ritter had that same problem. And it's interesting that they both came through the city, not through the legislature. The governors that I know personally, including Lamb and Romer and Bill Owens, whatever you think of their politics, they ran a tight ship. This is the goal. If a bill doesn't look like the way I want it, I'm going to work on it while it's in the House and Senate.
I think it's a mischaracterization, because I think that's actually Hickenlooper's philosophy. At least it was last year. Don't like a death penalty repeal bill? Let's let them know we're going to veto that, and the bill dies. But there were a lot of other things. There was a lot of effort to change some of those oil and gas bills. The governor really wanted to sign some of those bills last year to look like he was doing something to appease the environmentalists, but he couldn't. There was a lot of back and forth. His legislative team last year was proud of the fact that they massaged all these bills and got them to his desk, and he didn't have to veto anything. In hindsight, I think politically they realized they probably would have looked better if they vetoed something. But he wasn't AWOL. I mean, his legislative team was pretty active, and that was the approach they took last year.
I don't see it the same way that I've seen past Democrats and Republicans. I just see a difference between a governor that's been raised in the state government system.
Well, I think, of course there is. I mean, people always talked about Romer was such a genius because he had been in that building for long that he heard one time that Owens was going to do something, so he called a press conference to trump the state treasurer, things like that. And you actually saw Bill Owens and Wellington Webb do that a little bit back and forth. But that's never been who Hickenlooper is. That's because Bill Owens and Wellington Webb were politicians to the core. John's somebody who just happens to be in a political job, and I think he still feels like why do we fight about that? Like, seriously, why are we like that?
Can we agree on this? I felt that a year ago this guy was unsaleable. That he would have.
You said it. There was no
way.
No bench. We don't even have a folding chair.
Yeah, we don't. The Republicans don't have a bench. We don't even have a folding chair. A year later, I would argue that this governor right now is very vulnerable to being ousted in the election. The one thing he has going for him is he'll be running against a Republican, and that's his ace in the hole. But beyond that, he is vulnerable. Am I misreading that?
I think he's more vulnerable than he was a year ago. But we reported yesterday somebody leaked us a poll that was done, a private poll commissioned by an outside firm. Republican pollster in the South does a lot of polling here. Had Hickenlooper at 54% approval rating. That's up from where it was 4 or 5 months ago. Maybe it was the floods. I don't know if the poll is accurate, but it's pretty legitimate pollster. So maybe we're overestimating it. Maybe things are short-lived and voters don't have much of a memory. But I will say that going into he's running against Republicans, like you said. So who's the governor's office most afraid of? Mike Kopp. Mike Kopp's the one who they know is a conservative, but he comes across the least crazy. He's been out of the limelight for a while, right? He's not Tancredo, less baggage. That's the guy of all of them that they'd prefer not to run against. So
it's so great me being a Republican because we want the guy that's least crazy.
But listen, this morning, Mike Kopp touting an endorsement from Dave Schultheis. I mean, Lynn wrote an article a couple weeks ago. Schultheis's latest greatest hit, saying that adoption by gays, by Speaker Ferrandino, amounts to child abuse. This is the guy. I mean, Mike Kopp is touting an endorsement from that guy in a Republican primary. It tells you a lot about the state of Republican primaries and why it will be hard for even the guy that Hickenlooper doesn't want to run against.
That's why I advertise, and I've agreed with all the candidates that if they pay me, I won't endorse them. It's worked out so
well. The other
so
thing,
far.
too, that you see right now is because you have 6 people running for governor on the Republican side, it's just attack, attack, attack. And the Democrats not really are certain who should they go after yet. I think once the primary's over, and you have a lot more time, once the primary's over, that they have literally vans of ammunition to use against these guys. Previous things they've said, documents. I mean, off the top of my head, I can think of probably 10 things on each person running, each major candidate, where you can go, when this gets out there, they're in trouble. And that's what's going to happen then. So I think right now it's so easy to take shots at Hickenlooper because you don't have an opponent.
Well, here's the other thing about Hick. He's not a one-trick pony. I think the veneer of that kind of quirky, nerdy, nice guy who's a business moderate, I think that's gone. But if that's worn thin. If there's a guy who can reinvent himself and understands how to connect with people, John Hickenlooper can. And really, politics on that level is a popularity contest, and he's a very hard guy to dislike.
Well, this is a year that's all about political rehabilitation for the governor, for Democrats generally, and they got to do it quickly. And that's what you saw in the State of the State address today, is that the governor was trying to remind people who he was when they elected him. I'm bipartisan, I'm optimistic, I'm upbeat, I'm a little weird, but I'm not going to, he was emphasizing unity and trying to inspire people. This, the state came together after the floods. The state's recovering. The state's recovered from the recession. It's about his recovery, his political recovery, but he knows how to do it. You're right. He knows how to, a lot of people aren't going to forget what happened last year, but a lot of people will see a more, careful, on-message governor this year, and, November's a long way away.
It is.
That was brilliant. The recovery of John Hickenlooper.
Yeah, see
I
that?
used that in my story today, I think.
See? That's,
Really?
that's why we ask him here.
Yes,
We need at
to
least
counteract
one,
me.
We need one articulate guest.
Yes, that's
You're supposed
right.
to be the funny one, right?
Let's
No,
bring,
that's
let's
not
bring it
working.
back. Bring it back to the legislative session.
the ledge.
To the ledge. That being the case, is anything going to really get done? And let me toss out a couple things. One, oil and gas, because of course there'll be a statewide ballot initiative on it. And let me ask you about the voting law that I think is really dangerous from last year. We can get into that too. But are any of those things me?
You think it's dangerous?
I think it's dangerous.
Mister, I escaped the Doug Bruce treatment. You could've-
Are you kidding? If I went to jail, do you know how much that would be great for fundraising?
Do you know how much weight you would have lost? Remember, he went on the John Suthers diet.
Really?
Doug Bruce lost about 55 pounds.
Colorado
Hell,
Springs, not so bad.
Colorado
It's kinda
Springs
nice.
was a great home while I was there.
Those 2 days, he'll never forget them.
I'll never forget those 2
Seared
days.
in his memory forever.
Actually, it was a good 2 days. I had a great time. All right, let's start off with oil and gas first.
I thought you were going to go to the elections bill.
All right, let's go to elections.
Okay. Actually, you're going to see both sides try to do things with it. I think you are going to see the sponsors, the people who supported the bill, come in with their own tweaks to it. Whether it's
For those who might not be following us, that we're talking about
a complete rewrite of the election law that
Right.
passed last year.
And the election law, just to be real fast, made all of our ballots mail-in ballots,
Correct.
whether you want it delivered to you by mail or not, it gets sent out, and same-day voter registration,
Correct.
which I use to go down and move around and move to Colorado Springs and cast a ballot there, which I think is just an invitation for mischief. Anyway, so what are they going to do with it?
I think you're going to see tweaks, but what those tweaks are, I'm not really certain yet. Both sides have bills planned to totally do away with the bill, to require voter identification if you do same-day registration, to do this and to do that. I mean, one thing that's always lost in that bill is the Republicans love to say, and without the support of a single Republican lawmaker. Yes, but with the support of a lot of Republican county clerks who know elections better than those 100 people sitting in the legislature, maybe with the exception of Carol Murray.
The difference is those county clerks also want to have easy elections. Easy mail-in ballots are a whole lot easier, a whole lot less expensive, a whole lot less headache, but that doesn't mean they're a better way to run elections. And several county clerks, including El Paso counties and Douglas counties,
I
came
didn't
on
say
to
all
this
of them.
one. A lot of them. All right.
Right.
I think on the elections bill, you may see something to try to, iron out the conflict between the Constitution and the new law, which we saw in court last summer, ended up in getting mail ballots thrown out during the recalls, because if candidates can register up until 15 days before, you can't send mail ballots to everybody because you have to wait a certain amount of time to print your ballots. So I think maybe Democrats will try and iron that out. Republicans may try and repeal the whole thing, but that's not going anywhere either.
What about same-day voter registration?
I think that's a huge piece of that bill. I don't think that's going to change. I mean, until Republicans
Then
win,
it's going to be a fun 2014 election in the fall. I guarantee that one.
you're going to vote from 5 different places or something.
No, I
right?
think now that the AG has cleared what I did as there's the
That's
prosecution.
despicable but legal.
Despicable but legal.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Yes, it's proud.
America.
Now we have the full blueprint on how to move people from any district we want to any other district we want, and these are our new voting rights. And damn it, we're going to use them.
So in other words, you see boatloads of people shifting. Colorado Springs doesn't need that many Republicans. They can go to Jeffco. Then everybody moves into Jeffco then, because that's where the action is.
And that's where the action is on the state legislative issue. We also have going to have one of the hottest U.S.
Move to Aurora.
Move to Aurora the night so you can vote for either Romanoff or Kaufman. That's going to be the most contested national seat.
That's the most contested. That's the most watched nationally. But the reason Jeffco is amazing, if Jeffco is home to 4 of the 5 state Senate seats that are in play. I mean, and here's a weird thing to me, and maybe this means nothing, but former Senator Betty Boyd, running for city council in Lakewood, loses in November. I mean, is that the canary in the mine? Are things finally changing in Jeffco where it's just been bad luck for Republicans over and over again? So, I mean, if I'm one of you people, you operatives, one of you despicable pseudo lawbreakers, I move everybody into Jeffco.
Note to self: move Jeffco.
Possibly work on getting Perlmutter's numbers down for the first time.
Yeah, I don't think that's a big
luck.
issue.
Yeah.
We've only got a couple minutes left. Talk to me. Will there be anything substantial that comes out of the legislature this year, or is it just going to be tweaks and something for the governor to veto?
I think the budget will be substantial because it's bigger than we've seen in a long time, and so there'll be more money going to higher ed, more money going to K through 12. There'll be money for tax breaks. The business personal property tax is something Republicans have wanted for a long time. A lot of things have been shelved for a few years during the recession will come back, and I think Democrats are much more receptive now to some of the tax breaks and making those investments now. I think there'll be bipartisan support for that and for a number of other things, whether it's flood relief, things sort of ripped from the headlines. The flood relief, everybody will support that. A bill to put state funding behind the Safe to Tell hotline for high school kids, everybody will support that. There'll be some places where there's bipartisanship.
It might be a money session, like you said, following
which means
the
boring.
money.
Boring.
Well, no, not necessarily. My first session was all about money because remember, they were trying to figure out what are we going to do with all this money coming in. We had way too much. When it's fights over money, then you really see the intra-party too. No, they don't get a tax break. They should. There's going to be tax credits for parents, for child care.
How much does the
sort of
national
thing.
news affect this? Less than a minute. I think as the Obamacare story either stalls and no longer a problem, or if it keeps rolling, does that impact this session?
I don't think it impacts the session. I think it impacts November. It's mood music, and the question is how loud that is. How loud is how
This guy's on
aggrieved,
fire tonight.
How upset are people?
Well, those size 13
Mood
shoes.
music.
When you have size
Mood
13
music
shoes, you need
for the
mood
election.
music.
All right.
Good God. No wonder he works for a paying outlet. What do you think?
All sessions have their own personality. They're like children. They're all a session, but everyone's flavor is so different. And they're unpredictable. Could you have predicted last year would have been a revolt?
No, and
Right.
but it was a beautiful season. All right, thank you, sir. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. Join me on KHOW Radio. Listen for me on 6:30 a.m. Tell your friends about the Independence Institute, and we'll see you next week.